Once worshipped as a goddess for her mutant ability to control the weather, Ororo Monroe has been a warrior, a queen, an X-Man, and now an Avenger. Whatever her role, Ororo has always used her incredible powers to protect the planet and all its denizens. She is Earth's mightiest mutant. She is Storm. Storm begins her day like any other, adorned in a purple nightgown and head wrap as she chooses the outfit of the day. She cycles through her numerous different looks from across the years, from her Weather Witch to Gold Team Leader bodysuit, from punk rock to Goddess of Thunder and Regent of Araco. But today's the day for a new outfit, because Storm is about to step into a new role as Earth's official protector. She does all of this from the comfort of her sanctuary that she will soon open up to the peoples of the world to seek refuge and to be inspired. After Krakoa's fall, the spotlight is on mutant kind in the worst way, but if anyone could inspire hope to the masses, it'd be Ororo. Storm makes her way across the sanctuary on a walkway situated above African flora, fauna, and wildlife. She's come a long way from living in the attic in the X Mansion. The public gets their first view of Ororo Monroe in her new outfit, and as she approaches the podium, she's immediately bombarded with camera flashes. Despite widespread mistrust of mutant kind, a recent act of heroism on Storm's behalf has gained mutants a bit of favor among normal humans. But how could the actions of a single mutant change the course of mutant perception on the world stage? To answer that question, let's rewind the clock to 7 days ago, back in Oklahoma City, during a disaster of nuclear proportions. A nuclear power plant has exploded, and in the blink of an eye, this peaceful city is being eradicated. Storm flies in with fellow mutant and X-Man, Frenzy, and after a short recon flight, the two make their heroic landing. The devastation that this area has suffered is apocalyptic, but there's no time to be taken aback by the sights. There's work to do and lives to save. Storm and Frenzy still have no idea what's going on. They just know that the streets are eerily clear. But soon their questions are answered in the form of a massive shockwave, one which Storm wastes no time getting under control. Storm counters the shockwave with a massive wall of wind, holding the energy at bay, and then immediately tends to the civilians trapped underneath the rubble that was once their homes. The narration highlights this moment and how it's painfully similar to the conditions that rendered Storm an orphan, so she refuses to let the same happen to anyone else. She and Frenzy continue to tend to the citizens. Frenzy stops just for a moment when she uncovers an Orcus agent among the rubble, but Storm quickly gets things under control and reminds Frenzy that they're there to save everyone. But this touching scene is soon interrupted as another shockwave threatens every life that they've just saved. When two waves, exactly the same yet opposing, fold into each other, they both cease to exist. For every approaching shockwave, Storm shudders the air molecules around her with such precision that the advancing threat is nullified. Gotta love those descriptions. But Storm's flexing isn't gonna last very long, as concealed within this shockwave is a sharpened tree branch that lodges itself deep into Storm's shoulder. But she is not gonna let her humanity, her mortality, slow her down, and so she disappears, traveling in a bolt of lightning, completely ignoring the wound that she just sustained. As she gets closer to the source of the blast, she notices all the devastation to the environment. The downed trees, the skeletal remains of animals, the raging waters, and the nuclear winter. And she can't help but feel a sense of disgust and shame that this man-made monument of convenience has caused such destruction. At least, that's what she thinks, until another blast emits. Frenzy uses her own power of the thunderclap to dispel it. Storm's body is growing ever weaker as she gets closer to the source of the blast. Radiation poisoning begins to sink in. She grabs the crumpled remains of a plant door to use as a shield as she draws closer to the glow. She does not fear death, nor whatever awaits her inside, But that doesn't mean she's not taken by surprise when she finds the source is a child whose powers have begun to emerge uncontrollably, resulting in the deaths of everyone who was in the facility. The poor child begs for Storm to take him out of his misery, as he is well aware of the death and devastation that he is causing. But Storm isn't like that. She never has been and she never will be. Instead, she uses empathy. She understands what this is like. Every mutant does. The day when their powers are born and make themselves known to the world, usually in a way that they cannot control or even understand. And for someone whose powers can be as explosive and destructive as Storm's, she knows all too well what happens when your powers go awry. So she embraces the child, telling him that enough lives have been lost today. 3 days pass and the world reacts to this event. But already, we see that a certain narrative is being pushed in the media. Instead of telling the truth, this is all being blamed on a piece of alien tech that was being used by the government. People from various backgrounds weigh in, voicing their frustration and their anger, with some people even weaving in jabs against mutants, even though the problem, according to the news, is alien technology. Bigots will always find a way to make their bigotry known. Cut to Iron Man and Storm, running tests on this so-called alien tech that caused the event. Tony has run hundreds of millions of tests to see if this were possibly at the root of the problem, using his own tech, as well as that designed by the likes of Reed Richards, Lunella Lafayette, Forge, Riri Williams, and Shuri, to come to a conclusion that Storm already knew. But this lie actually put Storm in a difficult position. Seeing as how she and Frenzy just basically saved the entirety of Oklahoma City from complete destruction, mutants are being praised for the first time in a long time. But that praise can quickly grow into condemnation and hatred at the hands of angry mobs if the truth were to get out. But she knows at her core that that's wrong, as the very scientists who lost their life in this accident are being blamed for now introducing deadly alien tech to the world, and she does not want to dishonor the deceased. Like Tony says, she has a call to make, and the clock is ticking. Cut back to the present day. Aurora is addressing the crowd, and her time is growing even shorter, as every breath she takes brings up a cough of blood. But she carries on, because she is Storm, mistress of the elements, a member of the brave X-Men, and a new member of the mighty Avengers. She loves and respects her teammates, and is happy to be a part of their goals and values. But now the time has come for her to establish her own goals and values. To that end, she opens up her sanctuary to all peoples of the earth. Humans, mutants, sorcerers, and even gods. Anyone who needs a place of solace or refuge can call her sanctuary in the sky her home. She follows that up immediately with a very sobering truth, and she decides to tell the world the real source of the Oklahoma disaster. It wasn't alien tech, it was a mutant whose powers had awakened. The crowd turns on Storm, and her families on multiple teams are helpless. All they can do is watch and listen as their beloved Weather Witch is abandoned by the crowd that was once cheering her on. We're seeing Aurora be taken through the ringers on her first romp out in a long time. And while I appreciate it, because it's only going to lead to her reaching higher heights, it doesn't make it any easier to read. But the final page does, because God appears. Beyond our planet, our solar system, our universe, another watches with unquestionable intent of the cosmos. I am eternity, the beginning with no end, and I have found you worthy, Aurora Monroe. To me, my eternal Storm. Storm has 24 hours left to live, and a group of pirates are looking to hijack a vessel. But little do they know, their fate lies above them in the skies. It's the sky that is her home, but its air has become grit in her lungs. Storm is dying, yet she continues to save lives. then again, many times. To save lives, one must first punish evil. Storm then boards the ship after her impressive display, entering a coughing fit that turns up blood. One of the crew members goes to fetch her a bag of water, but he's soon stopped by the captain, who is unwilling to extend aid or even gratitude to Storm. He asks her to immediately leave the vessel, in fear that she might accidentally ignite their fuel and cause the ship to go up in flames. He's seen the news about Oklahoma, and he doesn't want his crew to die at the hands of a mutant. And so, Storm is abandoned by the people she saved, and forced to contend with her lot in life all alone. And if this wasn't bad enough, things are about to get even worse. As the clock ticks just out of Storm's sight, she carries on with her life as normal, tending to the animals in her sanctuary in her typical motherly fashion. But during a routine, luxurious shower, Storm is shocked to see clumps of her own hair washing down the drain with the dirt and grime of the day. Storm's failing health is as plain as day, and so she seeks help. Storm then travels to an unknown location in Arkansas, where she has to provide ID and proof of her Avengers membership in order to enter the premises. The gate is locked, and the doorman won't open it, but it doesn't matter. It's all an illusion. Enter the Night and Day Hospital for the extra mundane, where she's waited on by Dr. Day. Unlike the doorman, Dr. Day immediately recognizes Storm as an X-Man, which proves to be a big problem for Storm because Dr. Day does not treat X-Men. Storm does not take kindly to the doctor's discrimination, especially after being booted off of a boat that she just saved. But the doctor makes it clear, his self-admitted discrimination is not against mutants. 80% of his patients are mutants who he treats for free. It's only X-Men who he doesn't treat. Storm demands to know the cause for this discrimination, an answer that the doctor readily provides. When he and Night Nurse started this hospital, Tony Stark was the first to cut a nice big check on behalf of the Avengers and ForceWorks. Doctor Strange also consults at the hospital on behalf of the Defenders. Reed Richards supplies medical equipment on behalf of the Fantastic Four, and Danny Rand has donated on behalf of the Heroes for Hire. Even Moon Knight, who's usually a cheapskate, chipped in. The only ones who didn't were the X-Men. This was during the Krakoa era, while mutant kind was living on the island of Krakoa, safe from the restrictions of mortality and death.
Ironic.
So what does Storm do with this information? She does the only thing she can do, and parts with her most prized possession, her mother's ruby, which she had been wearing in her neck rings up to this point. On one hand, this shows how desperate Storm really is, as this is the only physical possession she has to remember her mother by. But I think it's also showing that she's willing to assume responsibility and accountability for the sins and faults of the X-Men. Another point on Storm's leadership qualification chart. The doctor's prognosis isn't surprising, but it's still dreadful to hear. Storm has radiation syndrome, one that has no medical cure. But as the doctor previously stated, his connections run far deeper than the field of conventional medicine. He puts his diagnosis into a black envelope, one that bears red symbols on it, and then the envelope disappears in a black and red puff of smoke. Dr. Day just sent a referral letter to the real doctor who Storm will be seeing, one who is a former Sorcerer Supreme who specializes in dark magic. And after handing Storm his address, he tells her to get it in gear because she only has 6 hours left to live. With the haste of a hurricane, Storm takes to the skies in search of this mysterious doctor who is her last chance at survival. The universe is strange and filled with even stranger coincidences, especially when it's desperately trying to kill you. Hours ago, Storm soared high above Nigeria, the very nation known as the heart of dark magic, the powerful yet sinister form of magic that Storm needs to save her life. Many dark spells taught in the covens of witches and the dens of sorcerers can trace their origins to this nation. Of all these dark magical spells, there is one that is the most known, Ile. After the fulfillment of several conditions, the word Ile is uttered, and the victim of this spell plummets to their doom. For what soars must one day surely fall. And fall Aurora does, as a mystic orca appears in the sky and tail slaps her down to the surface of the earth. Not in Nigeria, but in Haiti, where a dark and cryptic voice speaks to Aurora. This voice knows that she seeks the assistance of a sorcerer. He calls her out as the descendant of Ashake, who shares blood with Agamotto, the first sorcerer supreme. He knows that Storm is unable to cast a simple defense spell, so he asks, what would she do if her mutant powers were taken away from her? The goddess must now prepare herself, for she is in the presence of the Gunner of Gods. This is the Hongan Supreme, the Shaman Unmatched. This is Dr. Voodoo, and he will be attending to Storm on this fine evening and her last chance. Dr. Voodoo gives it to Aurora straight. She's dying, and he can't stop it. He knows this because as a necromancer, he not only sees the dead, but death sprites, creatures that can sense a life that is about to end. He's all too familiar with beings who can extend their lifespan. He personally made a deal with such a spirit to remove all radiation from her cells, as well as any other illnesses in her body, and she is currently the healthiest being in existence, and yet death sprites surround her, like ominous insects, hungry and ready to feast on a recently deceased corpse. In exchange for healing her of her immediate illness, Storm has been charged to not use her mutant abilities for 7 days. Storm sees this as an opportunity to brush up on her magic, hoping to eventually speak ancient tongues that were once only known to the witches and sorceresses of old, like those deep in her family line. But the good doctor isn't convinced that Storm will come into her own mystic-wise just yet. Even so, he thinks it was a worthy sacrifice. He's sure that she would rather part with her powers for 7 days instead of 7 organs, or her memory for 7 long months. This isn't her first time having to go without her powers, and she is more than well equipped to handle herself on her own. Before Storm can leave Dr. Voodoo's presence, the spirit of his own brother is taken aback by just how many death sprites surround Storm. Looks like Doc's the only one in his family with Kuth. But nevertheless, Storm is appreciative and can feel life returning to her. Even her hair is fuller than it's ever been. She is offered to stay at the Strange Academy, but Storm is not afraid, not of death and not of whatever awaits her in these next 7 days. And so she goes where anyone else would go in times of extreme crisis. She goes to where she knows she'll be accepted, loved, and cherished. As the X-Men enjoy the outdoors chopping firewood, Wolverine smells a familiar smell. Nimrod. He pops his claws straight through his flesh. Gambit, Nightcrawler, and Rogue all prepare for what's coming in their own way, but nothing could prepare them for a tornado landing in their backyard. Storm emerges with a mile-wide smile, instantly embraced by Rogue. Turns out she actually called ahead, but Gambit said he wanted her arrival to be a surprise. Everyone is elated to see her, even Logan, who tries to creep away without showing some affection. Put a pin in that, it will be relevant later. Storm has lived different lives as different people, but one thing she'll always be is an X-Man. Even if she does not want to admit it to herself in this era of her life, she would rather have the X-Men by her side than face the challenges ahead as a lone hero. But this isn't a rest and relaxation type of vacation. Storm is gonna get her workout in proper, and who better to help her with that than Logan. The two mix in playful banter among blows, and powerful blows they are. Muay Thai flying knees, devastating left hooks, suplexes, triangle chokeholds, and peekaboo punches.
My style is impetuous.
But as the days and the storms rage on, Wolverine tells Storm that she's had enough. This isn't training anymore, it's a beatdown. But Storm is not willing to stay down. She always gets back up. And as she summons all of the rejuvenated life that's coursing in her body, she tackles Wolverine to the ground. And then, there, in the rain and moonlight, the two catch each other's gaze. And the former teammates are overcome with passion, rekindling an old flame that hadn't been lit in years. The two embrace and take each other. Afterwards, they retreat to Wolverine's room for a much-needed and well-deserved good night's sleep, which is the perfect time for a giant razor bill to show up and wake Aurora up.
Bird.
The bird is here on behalf of God Emperor Doom, ruler of Latveria, sorcerer supreme, and soon-to-be conqueror of Earth. He wishes to parley with Storm on mutant matters. Doom wants to speak to Storm tonight, but she is only willing to go if the razor bill would be so generous as to grant Storm a ride. Inside, Aurora is greeted by Rogue, who is delighted to hear that she knocked boots with Wolverine. That is a phrase I did not expect to read in this comic book. But Storm is not proud of what she did. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing, one that she doesn't want to announce to the whole mansion. She only came in to get some clothes from Rogue, as well as some concealable weapons. Rogue asks what's the deal with her and Logan, but Storm has set a path for herself, and now that she's announced it to the world, she has to see it through. And a diplomatic win is one they desperately need. Mutants in general, Aurora in particular. Aurora Monroe is everything you would expect from a storm god. Brave, rageful, fierce, unrelenting, powerful. She will fight till every bone in her body breaks. But when it comes to matters of the heart, she is like you and me, human. And with her departure from her friends and her old lover, though invisible to the uninitiated, her death sprites return, signaling dangerous events ahead. Lightning strikes and the wind howls as Storm closes in on Dr. Doom's castle, located in Doomstadt, Latveria. Rain pelts Storm's face as she rides atop the razor bill. Storm is at the end of a deadly game, and the price for breaking the rules is obvious. In many African cultures, before the dead are buried, the body is first cleansed in water and adorned in opulent garments. They believe death ought to be celebrated, not mourned. For death is not the end, just a metamorphosis into something different, something more, something beautiful. Storm descends the spiraling staircase of Doom's castle in an outfit that defies description, as if walking straight out of the pages of a fairy tale or the portrait of a queen. But this queen doesn't simply stand on ceremony, and underneath the elegant dress and opulent jewels lie two knives fixed to the small of Storm's back. Just because she's powerless doesn't mean she's defenseless. Storm takes her seat across the God Emperor, who immediately compliments her immaculate taste. Storm is no stranger to flattery, but Doom claims that he never flatters. As Doom assures Aurora that she will never have to order anything while dining with him, the two catch each other's eyes. This is a position that both of them have been in at multiple times over the years. In fact, their entire relationship can be summed up by this very shot. When they first met, Doom ruled a country. Now he stands to rule the world. While Storm was still a relative new recruit of the X-Men, she had yet to lead the team or forge her own. She had yet to sit as the queen of a foreign country or on the ruling council of a nearby planet. And she had not titled herself as Earth's protector. So it's fitting that these two are reunited now that they've both elevated themselves. But as her dish is revealed, a bowl of gumbo with two garnishes forming an X at the center, Storm's mind is not on the present, but on the past. several years ago, when she, as a little girl, ate beside her father, and this girl did not want to eat her father's cooking. But David Monroe was not content to just let Ndare do all the cooking, and so even though his dramatic 5-year-old was not looking forward to eating her slimy soup, he insisted that she take a spoonful. And when she did, she was pleasantly surprised. As is Storm in the present, when she takes a spoonful of Dr. Doom's gumbo and sees that it tastes just like her father's. She's amazed to see that he knows the recipe, but this is Doom we're talking about. Doom cuts to the chase, and finally gets to the reason why these two are dining across from each other tonight. He's sure that Storm, as a mutant who soars through the skies, is familiar with the tale of Icarus. He relates the metaphor to all of mutant kind, who had previously risen up far above mankind in the Krakoa era, but now have fallen lower than ever. The same also applies to Storm as an individual, who only days ago stood on the world stage and was prepared to open up her sanctuary to the masses, only to have them reject her as she told the truth about the Oklahoma incident, and then to be told that she only has hours to live, to be spared from the jaws of death by an ancient spirit, only to then be forbade from using her powers. Yet even now, she doesn't bow her head or cower in a corner. She gets dressed to the nines and dines with the God Emperor. Or as Dr. Doom put it, she reaches beyond the stars, always ignoring how often she comes crashing down. This is something that Doom knows personally, as the Sorcerer Supreme who holds the world as his plaything, a Romani who has faced discrimination by those who seek strength in majority, and as a man who has reached beyond the stars. He feels kinship with Storm and with mutant kind. Doom takes a stand in his matching green and black outfit, noticing that Storm is not taking a liking to the dessert, and so as a gesture of good faith, he orders that the cook be brought before her to be drawn and quartered. For Doom abhors incompetence, almost as much as Storm abhors needless violence. 2 hidden knives slice through the air, one going right through the would-be executioner, the other aimed right for Doom's eye, just as Rogue had advised in the previous issue. If this were anyone other than Dr. Doom, they'd be missing an eye right now. But this is not anyone else. Without lifting a finger, Doom halts the hurling knife in the air with his magic. Storm makes her stand with the train of her dress in hand, ordering the chef to be left alone. But Doom is confused. Why would Storm, who could wield the wind like swords, choose to throw knives of metal? Storm calls Doom out for choosing to make mutants his people at a time when many powerful governments are stockpiling Omega-level mutants like nuclear warheads. Doom is unrelenting in his questioning. Why would Storm choose to ride atop a bird when she could travel through lightning and appear in a flash, just as she did the first time she came to Doom's castle? Storm has not seen the virtue and solidarity of Doom, not when Orcus was murdering her people, and not when they attacked her and the Avengers in the Afghan desert. Finally, she cuts to the chase and demands to know what Victor truly wants from mutants and from her. Doom puts Aurora in an impossible position, trapping her with a spell, not terribly unlike the one that encased her in chrome all those years ago. Only this time, she is fully aware of the outside and able to communicate. She just can't move. Not yet, at least. Doom deduces the truth. Aurora Monroe is powerless, but he needs them for the task ahead. He tells Storm to rejoice, for Doom is kind. Doom's peculiar kindness unlocks something in Storm, something that is core to her very being. For Storm is rational and the queen of restraint, but one thing she will not tolerate is being bound or confined. And in her innate need to reclaim her autonomy, her powers awaken once again. Even though she is no longer plagued by bouts of claustrophobia, she's still the same little girl who's always loved and craved freedom. To be restricted by the whims of another is just too much. So she orders Doom to let her go before she ends his reign before it even begins. But just as lightning erupts from her eye sockets, a feathered hand with clawed fingers stretches forward out of the abyss and erupts through Storm's torso. This is Egon, and he will not be cheated. Not even the descendant of Ashake will defy this spirit what was promised to him, and so he takes her life and prepares to take her planet. Storm lies cold and lifeless on Doom's floor as he begins to battle the ancient spirit. Skull fractured, jugular burst, spine broken, entrails mangled, punctured heart, splintered ribs. Aurora Monroe is dead, and Storm of the Earth is no more. In the spiritual plane, Aurora is reunited with her father. The two have missed each other immeasurably. Aurora wants both of her parents present so that she can tell them both about the wonderful life she's lived, from her first crush to her friends at Westchester, her new home in Atlanta, and her wedding. She was the queen of Wakanda, even though her mother always called her a princess. She needs to see her mother and tell her how her little girl saved the world so many times. But Ndare already knows. She's proud of her. Aurora knows that she's not going with her father, even though her parents would want nothing more than to have them with her again. Leaving Aurora all by herself is like leaving a flame in the wind. But they've seen her grow into a flame that refuses to be put out. The wind doesn't take from Aurora, it fuels her. She rides it as Hadari Yao. As a child, Aurora told her father to tell her mom that she loves her, because she swore that slimy soup was going to be the death of her. But David told her that she'll have to tell her herself when she gets back from work. Now, David gives her that same message, saying she'll be able to tell her mother she loves her herself after Storm's white hair turns gray. And after a tearful goodbye to her father's spirit, the metamorphosis begins. Storm of Earth is no more. In her place, there will be something new, something more, something beautiful. Eternity returns and calls his eternal storm forth. She emerges, adorned again in white and gold that was teased at the end of issue 1. Only this isn't a tease. This is the real deal. Storm has ascended to a new form, one that's more than equipped to deal with the likes of Egon and any other cosmic force or deity that would stand against her. You've heard it said before that in the beginning there was nothing, but that is a lie. Before the universe, there was Oblivion, the only void that could house the end of all things, death, without ceasing to exist. Great artists steal. That is what our universe did. Infinity within eternity. In a sudden burst of immense energy, our universe was born within the Oblivion void, always expanding into it, always taking from it. The first great artist. This was but one of many bouts between two cosmic arch-rivals, Eternity and Oblivion, but more on that later. In the present day, in our universe, the eternal storm hovers, legs crossed in the sky, surrounded by dancing lightning bolts, as the spirit that once claimed her life now begs for mercy. For Egon did save Storm's life just a week ago, but this is not merely Aurora Monroe anymore. This is Eternal Storm. Aurora is not present at the moment. Eternity controls this vessel. Egon need not be afraid, for he is a spirit, and he will never truly die. But under colossal atmospheric pressure, he'll take a form that can easily be consumed. From there, Eternal Storm makes her way to Doom, shooting down like an arrow fired straight from heaven and wielding a lance made of pure lightning. But Doom is not afraid. He tells Storm that she's the one in danger. She brought a demon to his nation. She is to leave now or face Doom's wrath. She stands her ground and prepares for combat. As each of Storm's footfalls cause rubble to erupt from the ground. Any lesser being would be trembling right now. But Eternity is no stranger to combat. 3 billion years ago, he was in the middle of a conflict just like this. He and his rival, Oblivion, were having a debate. Oblivion was growing weak. His twin Death was encased within him, but he no longer had the strength to contain her. Too much of him had been taken up by Eternity, and so he moved that Eternity become the new house for Death, along with Eternity's twin sister, Infinity. The living tribunal sits above them and judges. He decides that this can only be settled by one way, trial by combat. Eternity calls forth his champion of choice, one of his many creations. Oblivion has made no beings and spawned no heirs, so he will be fighting on his own behalf. For around his waist he wore a belt of the skulls of all of the previous eternal champions who had fallen to Oblivion's scythe. 24 victims have fallen in these trials, and this current champion would make 13. This is not just a recounting of one bout between two rivals. This is how death became a part of our universe. And now that Eternity has death on his side, he plans to deliver death to Doom's doorstep. Eternal Storm is not fooled by Dr. Doom's simulacrum. For before the existence of the earth, the sun, or the moon, Eternity was. And now he will teach Doom humility. He raises Storm's hand, and with a snap of her fingers, a horde of Doombots are frozen in place, never to move again, as they are shattered by the lightning lance of the Eternal Storm. In what remains of Doom's castle, the Eternal Storm interrupts Doom's dinner. Doom does not waver, nor does he beg or grovel, because he knows the person who Eternity is controlling. He knows the true Storm, Aurora, who would never take the life of an unarmed man. Eternity, who had sought to teach Doom a lesson in humility, is humbled himself, for try as he might, he can't make Storm's hands commit the act. As Storm's hands tremble, her mouth speaks forward with Eternity's words.
You seem to know my host a great deal. Very well, Victor Von Doom. It seems you have escaped certain death.
Doom is not surprised, for in his eyes, it's death who evades his wrath. As Eternal Storm retreats, a recent event crosses the mind of the one who now controls Aurora's body. 3 long eons had passed since Oblivion parted with his sister, his twin, Death. His existence has grown cold, lonely, and incomplete without her. Eternity titles himself reasonable and says he's willing to give Death back. But Oblivion is not amused by Eternity's haughty attitude, for there's nowhere left in the Oblivion void for Oblivion to house his sister. Eternity has stretched so far that there's nowhere left for her to go, except where she currently is. Eternity has taken, and yet he eternally hungers for more. It's who he is. But Oblivion is far beyond the point of caring or bargaining. If Eternity exists to expand infinitely, then maybe existence would be better without him. Oblivion moves for Eternity's end, the collapse of the universe, so that he can be reunited with his sister Death and make room for her once more. The living tribunal descends and dispenses justice upon Oblivion. The will of the one above all is for the primordials to always be. Who is Oblivion to question that will and move for the end of eternity? The motion is denied, and Oblivion's right to convene trial by combat permanently revoked. The sentence? For Oblivion to spend all of his existence separated from death. The 4 primordials deny that such a thing ever happened, but one did see. The one above all did see. So did the living tribunal. They saw as Oblivion shed a tear for his sister, an act so powerful that the one above all was moved. In that instant, a wave of unmitigated empathy echoed throughout all of existence. The Watcher felt it. The Asgardians felt it. Spider-Man's spider senses blared like a fire alarm directly in his ear. And in deep space, the Phoenix felt it. She felt Aurora too. For this was the beginning of a chain of events that would link Eternity and Aurora. The Living Tribunal decided that there would be a trial by combat, one to settle this ancient score once and for all. To the victor, there awaits limitless eons of unbound sovereignty and freedom to house infinity, death, and whatsoever they choose. And the defeated shall be hammered into a speck smaller than an atom, with no room for even a single thought. The Living Tribunal asks Eternity, who will be his eternal champion? Who shall aid the universe? His answer is clear. The one whose will stands unconquerable even now. One who couldn't be defeated by death or eternity. Aurora Monroe is his champion. But she's not in any state to fight. She's recovering from the most traumatic experience that she's felt in a very, very long time. The sky is alive with the lights of war, evidence of a fierce battle taking place among the divine who harness such elements as their own. Thor, Shango, Chak, Susanoo, and Zeus. And on the surface of Earth is Aurora Monroe, whose COTA conjures a cataclysmic lightning blast, enough to make the gods of old stop and pay attention. But their tale is for another day. For now we return with Storm to her abode in Atlanta, where Japheth, also known as Maggot, formerly of the X-Men, is seeking refuge and sanctuary. Storm's home is a place of peace for all who enter, but outside of her hovering home, there is no peace to be found. The horns of war are blown, and the sanctuary transforms into a battleship of great destructive power, known as Thundercloud. As Storm adorns herself in solid black vibranium armor and arms herself with blades old and new, Storm thinks back to mere hours ago when she was in more comfortable clothes and she shared a meal with Charles Xavier, one that she prepared with her own hands, despite having every reason in the world to be hesitant to let him into her house. She broke bread with him, like they did in the old days. People are after him. People armed to the teeth with weapons made to hurt him, and he would deserve it, because he has broken out of the Greymalkin prison for mutants. After receiving a psychic distress call from his daughter, Xandra, Empress of the alien Shi'ar Empire, Xavier broke out of prison to help her, but he also suffers from a mutant brain tumor that's affecting his telepathic powers. But as is often the case, the founder of the X-Men refuses to accept the truth, and so his X-Men remain divided over whether to aid or apprehend him. Storm has had little time to process the recent events, no time to accept the fact that she was dead, or deal with the numerous attacks on her autonomy, and what of the cosmic stage that she now stands on. No time to think for that. There are people who need help, even if those people are very, very difficult to deal with. Though she has every reason to be hesitant with inviting him into her home, she also still remembers all that he's done for her over the years. How he taught her, trained her, fed, clothed, and housed her, and asked nothing in return except that she shine as brightly as she possibly can. All of the X-Men owe a great debt to Charles Xavier, and yet his actions as of late stand in stark contrast to the man that these people have dedicated their lives to, and a man whose life now hangs in the balance. 95% of escaped mutant convicts are killed during the manhunt sent to retrieve them. These delectable nachos just may be Charles's last meal. Aurora asks Charles why he's really here. Charles always was a dreamer, and now, in his darkest hour, He wants that dream back. Even just a piece of that old magic that was lost in their unified dreams when they were forced to awake to harsh realities. Charles Xavier wants to raise the dead one final time. In the present hour, a portal opens before the trio. Storm and Maggot form a defensive line in front of Charles. They're prepared for men armed with guns and weapons trained to kill. Men who never knew or cared for Charles Xavier. But what emerged from the other side of that portal was anything but. Those who were after Xavier knew him quite intimately, for whom better to hurt him a great deal than family? Cyclops emerges, with his team at his back. Magic, Kid Omega, Juggernaut, Psylocke, and Temper. The uncanny X-Men waltz into Storm's sanctuary with a very uncanny mission at hand. Scott tells his sister to stand down. She refuses. He knows that Xavier has likely fed Aurora a sad story, as he usually does, for the greater good. It's his true trump card, not his telepathy, but Storm remains resolute, her ritualistic war paint accentuating the harshness of her facial expressions. She doesn't want to do this, but they can't back down. They must retrieve the professor and return him to Greymalkin prison. If there's to be any hope of peaceful coexistence with humans and among mutants, everyone must be held accountable for their actions. This includes the professor. But Storm knows there will likely come a day when Scott is in need of an exception, and on that day he would bless the heavens that she is who she is. She also knows that Scott won't back down, and so she beckons her brother and his team to combat, and the sanctuary comes alive with battle. Cyclops orders Kid Omega to shield them from Xavier's telepathy. Juggernaut is sicked on Maggot, while he and Psylocke will make a move for the professor and withdraw, leaving Temper and Magic to deal with Storm. He anticipates that she will not use her full strength and risk destroying her own base. But today, someone else resides within Storm. From the sidelines, he watches and grows more and more impatient. Pitiful. Years of fighting shoulder to shoulder with powerful comrades. Teammates who drafted countless alternate battle plans. Years of testing yourself against weak beings. You think this false strength is enough for every battle? Eternity's words rumble within Storm's body and around her soul as she conjures the elements against her former teammates, only to keep them at bay. Her moves prove effective, but only by so much. Cyclops and Juggernaut remain, with Maggot being overpowered by the mighty Marco. As Aurora's Tempest proved too much for Psylocke and Kid Omega, Scott unleashes an optic blast of mega proportions, so powerful, his own visor can't even contain the energy. Storm throws her hand forward, conjuring up an ice blast, and a beam struggle emerges between the X-Men's two greatest leaders of all time. But still, Eternity is not pleased. You've assembled no truly dangerous weapons. You've set no traps. Nothing but heart and goodwill. Very well. Watch and learn, child. She throws up her arms, letting the vibranium armor take the full brunt of Cyclops' attack, not knowing that Eternity already had a counter. He opens Storm's mouth and spews forth a tundra blast powerful enough to bring about the Ice Age, one which nearly seals Scott's fate.
You have fought well, brave mutant. Make peace with your existence, Scott Summers, leader of the X-Men.
The rest look on in horror as Eternal Storm's unbridled power locks Scott away in a prison of ice, and Juggernaut goes on the warpath, ripping Maggot's arm completely off. But Eternal Storm is not scared. Compared to Eternity's brothers, all present parties are weak, and with a flick of the wrist, they are all exited from Storm's sanctuary. Immediately attending to Maggot, Eternal Storm coughs up the essence of Egoun, allowing Maggot to eat off of it and heal up. He will emerge an Omega Maggot. But first, Juggernaut wants a word with the eternal Wind Rider. Nothing can stop the Juggernaut, a theory Eternal Storm is more than happy to put to the test. She conjures up mighty lightning javelins that skew Juggernaut's arms, holding him in place in the perfect position to receive the immortal head smash from the Eternal Storm. The fighting is far too intense for Storm, alerting her former teammates to the fact that Storm is likely not in control here. But there's no time for such ideation now. Psylocke speaks to Beast telepathically as he makes his way to the engine room and is ordered to blow it up. Storm's sanctuary, powered by the same impossibly large mech technology that was initially sold to the public as the source of the Oklahoma City explosion. And yet, as Hank McCoy stands in position, he is approached from behind by his teacher. In her good-natured defense of the professor, Storm has put herself in the position to once again be possessed by Eternity. And while he saved her before, it's now Eternity that puts Storm in a difficult position, because he will soon learn a lesson that all beings in the universe eventually come to learn.
Don't mess with the X-Men!
The issue starts off with the team outside at San Francisco Bay, the former mutant utopia. Temper is making a mess of Cyclops' face while she thaws him out, as Psylocke loses contact with Hank in the control room. Magic questions how Storm got so powerful, while Psylocke laments over Storm's poor judgment in the ordeal. Long story short, Xavier is dying of a brain tumor that's also causing his powers to go awry. He didn't tell Storm any of this, and she can't tell on her own because of her natural psychic resistance. Storm has unknowingly made the situation worse by exposing San Francisco to Xavier's haywire psychic powers. Put a pin in this, it will be relevant later. While the X-Men prepare to try again to take Eternal Storm on, Chuck takes control of Beast to prevent him from finishing his mission, but Kid Omega jumps in and brings an end to Chuck's mind puppetry. The two Omega telepaths have a telepath off, wherein Charles nearly comes out victorious, but Kid Omega conjures up a psychic clone of Charles' evil twin, Cassandra Nova, and puts the kibosh on that. He and Beast then subdue the Professor with help from Magic, who had swiped Magneto's anti-telepathy helmet and stuck it on Hank while the telepaths were duking it out. And now, back to Eternal Storm being an absolute piss goblin while beating the brakes off the X-Men. Marco's helmet had been totaled by Eternal Storm's immortal head smash, but being the unstoppable force that he is, he just gets right back up and dares Eternal Storm to give him more. Eternal Storm turns the cosmic fan up to 100 and nearly blows Juggernaut away. She could rip the flesh from his bones with these winds. But before she can do that, Temper turns the cosmic fan off by adjusting the temperature. She controls that which makes wind, but Eternal Storm controls far more than wind and conjures up some of her iconic lightning blades. Magic tags in and leads a charge on Eternal Storm as the team gets its second wind. No pun intended. But nothing can put a dent in Eternal Storm. Magic's Soul Sword, Juggernaut's haymakers, Eternal Storm is as tough as she is powerful. The X-Men are now painfully aware of how outclassed they are, and while they don't know who is possessing Storm, they know it's something or someone they can't outgun. So Psylocke plays her trump card and threatens Maggot, who's healing up inside of a cocoon. Eternal Storm may not care about him, but Aurora does. So when Psylocke threatens to kill him, she listens. She holds Storm accountable for her actions and the danger she's brought to everyone's doorstep by siding with Xavier. She accuses Storm of not thinking she can ever be wrong and challenges her to let shame empower her to take back control of her body. It's super effective. Storm returns to normal and orders Psylocke to step away from Maggot. But Psylocke has killed more innocent people than some diseases, so this would be no sweat off her back. The team will leave with Charles, and Psylocke challenges Storm to take it up with her personally, blade to blade, if she has a problem with that. Storm agrees on one condition: Xavier must not go back to Greymalkin prison. A compromise is made, and the X-Men retreat with Chuck in tow. At least they would, if they weren't stopped by X Factor first. In the far reaches of the universe, in the near future, a cataclysmic battle comes to an end. A member of the Thor Corps and the Spirit of Vengeance lie motionless as a black flaming sword is embedded in the ground. Norrin Rad, the Silver Surfer, approaches and borrows the weapon from one of the fallen combatants. Imbued with both cosmic power and the fiery fury of Surtur's Twilight Sword, Norrin Rand is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Yet this being, whose presence alone strikes fear into the hearts of trillions, answers to an even greater power, Galactus, the devourer of worlds. But even the cosmic ravager known as Galactus answers to another, the universe plague, the Black Winter, Ender. But before an Ender can reach our universe, they must pass through the Oblivion Void, and many Enders who have tried have met a swift end at the hand of the most powerful of the primordials, Oblivion. This fearsome cosmic leviathan bears a striking resemblance to a serpent facing off against our Weather Witch, as she runs the risk of meeting a swift end at its hand. This anaconda is imbued with the super soldier serum, and it hungers for mutant flesh. Its teeth dripping with blood and venom, its eyes aglow in the night sky. But Storm is not afraid, and neither is the Omega Maggot, who serves the anaconda a devastating right hand. But he's still not 100%. He's still recovering from his fight with Juggernaut, and so Storm takes the lead and chases down the beast. Making note of its cold-blooded nature, she freezes the air around her so much that ice falls from the sky and cocoons the trees in frost. She doesn't need the creature to die, just to go to sleep. But how did she end up in this predicament? To answer that question, we must roll back the clock a week ago, back when Tony Stark, the Iron Man, made himself comfortable in Storm's sanctuary. And this wasn't the first time. But unbeknownst to Tony, Aurora is well aware of his late-night rendezvous with his lady friends in her home, and she is not in the mood to entertain his shenanigans tonight. Before going back to bed, Aurora tells Tony that she does indeed sleep on a real mattress. She doesn't just float in the air, but that's not what he heard from T'Challa. Beside herself with these annoyances, Aurora demands to know why Tony's in her home. This is the first time they've exchanged words since she asked for his assistance following the Oklahoma incident. He wants to know if she will keep secrets. But Storm's already deduced the real reason why he's here. As she perceives the cosmic dust radiating off of his suit, she can tell that he's gone off in search of Thor and failed, meaning that she, for whatever he needs, is his last hope. But this isn't an Avengers mission. He can't even tell her who this mission is for. And so if a word of this leaves Storm's lips, Tony will be left with no choice but the nuclear option, the publishing of her browser history. And if there's nothing juicy enough in hers, then maybe he'll check out Maggot's life and see if there's something juicier there. Deep in the heart of Brazil, the Avengers have been working with quote-unquote mad scientists to recreate the super soldier serum. But during a weather anomaly, the serum was lost, along with a good man who became a certain anaconda's late-night meal. His remains, along with the remaining samples of the super soldier serum, must be found before they fall into the wrong hands. And they need to get to the bottom of this anomaly. Storm is indeed their last hope, because they've tried everything. The only other option they have left is one of divine proportions. The divine option proves effective, as the anaconda is obliterated by a single strike of lightning. But this is not Storm's doing. The pilot's remains are obliterated along with the snake, and any trace of the serum. The mission is a failure, but Storm isn't concerned with that. Something's amiss. How is Maggot able to keep up with her speed without losing breath, or having an elevated heart rate? More importantly, this lightning was not Storm's. Something else. Someone else was behind it. That someone was Mama Ragan, the regulator of tempests, whose very presence is altering the atmosphere of the area. The atmosphere continues to change as the air molecules around them are replaced purely with oxygen molecules, making this space even more conducive to lightning. Lightning that forms within the mouth of the Orisha, Shango. Airbound and axe in hand, Shango spits forth a torrent of electricity down upon Storm. But she is prepared and counters at the perfect moment with her own ice blast. Taking a page from Eternity's playbook, she remembers how he used her body and powers as they had never been used before, and she has added his moves to her own repertoire. Before Storm and Maggot could even realize who is upon them, another enters the battle, Susanoo, whose lightning teleportation leaves after images. Maggot tries to deliver another crafty right hand as he did on the Anaconda, but the Japanese storm god is far too fast for the Omega mutant. Luckily for Maggot, he has some divine storm power of his own on his side, as Storm counters with a whirlwind that momentarily traps and disorients Susanoo. But the storm god is no stranger to combat. He zaps back down to the ground and counters with a lightning clap that sends Maggot flying. Storm is barely able to keep her feet planted and takes a moment to redirect her teammate with a water whip that sends him flying back to the sanctuary. At that moment, the fourth and final new combatant enters the battlefield, Chak, the Mayan god of storms. He sees Storm trying to retreat, and that's something that in his opinion, a storm god should never do. He gives Storm a lesson in godhood by grabbing her hair and slamming her face first into the ground. When you are a self-proclaimed storm god, what do you do when the real ones come for you? And it's here, as she lies face first in the murky Brazilian jungle waters, that she remembers a lesson that Dr. Voodoo taught to her, the moment when she was introduced to the voodoo concept that would now save her. She is the descendant of Ashake, who shares blood with Agamotto, the first sorcerer supreme. When powers won't do, magic will. Ile, the dark magic spell that causes its victims to plummet to their doom. For regardless of how powerful or how divine one is, that which soars must one day surely fall. And fall they do, as a mystical octopus comes to the aid of Storm, wrapping its eldritch tentacles around the storm gods and introducing them to Brazil's jungle waters. Storm's eyes grow black in her head, the same way they did so many years ago when she first met Charles Xavier, in the middle of a tempest of her own making, proving that her mutant abilities, her divine nature, and her mystic bloodline are united. They are not merely separate elements, they are all together one, all together her. But one of the storm gods is still in the fight. Mama Ragan, atop his steed, hurries towards Storm with all the fury of a lightning volley. Storm is out of options, and soon will be out of time, so she grabs Susanoo's blade and does the only thing she can to free herself from Chak's grip. She slices through her own curly locks. The final offense of the night. The second of freedom is all Storm needs to blitz herself away in lightning. She descends in Rio de Janeiro, calling out to Maggot that the mission is not over. He is to tell Iron Man that she knows what is behind the weather anomaly, and it will soon come to an end. Whatever ashes of the pilot's body that remains will be sifted through the earth and given back to his family. But first, Storm needs her armor and blade. She's going god hunting. At least she would be if Thor weren't standing in her way. He knows all about the fury of the storm gods, but he says nay to it all.
I am Storm, mistress of the elements.
In the damaged skies of Brazil, Aurora Monroe rises, clad in vibranium war armor, face adorned in electrified war paint. She proclaims her power and speaks to the skies, not as an object or a concept, but as a person. The skies have been damaged and hurt by the storm gods, wielding the weather as a weapon instead of a consciousness, something that Aurora will not abide. By her power, she makes the weather whole again. On the ground in Rio de Janeiro, The Avengers look up to clear skies, T'Challa, the Black Panther, Tony Stark, the Iron Man, and Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic himself. T'Challa is nearly without words, taken by the splendor of it all, and intimately knowing the one who is responsible. Tony rips him back down to reality with his usual banter. The two tech marvels quibble amongst themselves, going tit for tat, first regarding technology, and then taking shots with each other's exes. The happily married and never divorced Reed Richards holds back laughter. Maybe one day they'll get it together. Miles away in the Amazon rainforest, Thor and Storm work together to bring an end to this turbulent mission, their winds and lightnings dancing among one another as they gather up the ashes of the destroyed Anaconda and the devoured pilot's body, placing them into a vial, which will be taken to Dr. Voodoo, who will use his necromancy skills to sift out the pilot's remains to send to his family. But the completion of the mission leaves no time for celebration. Thor has seen much in his travels. He has learned about the first storm god. Before Zeus, there was Hadad. He was so mighty that he wove eternity as his cloak, forged death into a war club. The Phoenix Force was his armor, and eternity was his shield. He had grown too strong for anyone to take. Anyone but one. The one above all. But what is death to a being which forges death into a weapon? At some point, his return was inevitable, and though he is still far away, his machinations can be felt even here. The Silver Surfer Soot, Herald of Galactus, attacks the wrought storm that had devoured the mighty Ravager, and demands that he be spewed from its mouth. This great gathering of rot, decay, and the end of all things can only be leading to one conclusion: a thunder war, as the multitude of storm gods take sides, some seeking to stop Hadad and others serving as his wrath. To what faction do Storm's attackers belong? Ultimately, it matters not, for if they attack Storm again, they will have to deal with the Norse god of thunder. Storm and Thor have tested their collective mettle in battle time and time again. Most recently, she fought in his Thor core against the primordial god Tyrannos. And in these Thunder Wars, she'll likely stand shoulder to shoulder with him again. But at the moment, Aurora plans to stand alone. While grateful for Thor's help, she has every intention of making her attackers beg for help, instead of calling on it herself. And in a flash of lightning, the Weather Witch is gone. Days later, Aurora trains herself rigorously to the point of debilitating sweat and exhaustion, not out of fear of the coming battle against Oblivion, and not in the face of the looming Thunder War, but at the summon of her nation's government. Only something as insidious as bureaucracy could make Aurora Monroe shudder, and for good reason. Whenever mutant oppression, persecution, or destruction is at play, the hand of the government is never too far away. There are indeed forces to which even a goddess must bow, as her ancestral Aunt Ashake once said. And sometimes those forces wear suits and carry government-issued badges and weapons. And so, Storm takes the proverbial fight to them, dressed in ashen gray business attire. Hair tied up into braids, augmented by extensions, which see her white hair grow silver. Her teleportation comes at the hands of one Eden, aka Manifold, whose conversations with the universe allow him to bend it to his will. Today that conversation comes in the form of a portal, which Storm exits in Washington, D.C., in front of the J. Edgar Hoover FBI headquarters. A building named after a man not known for his acceptance and tolerance of different people. But whereas Manifold has a bad feeling about this, Storm is optimistic. Should things go south, Manifold is ready to start the second Krakoa age, one not announced by a whisper, but by deafening thunder. Manifold is tasked with keeping the sanctuary safe while Storm is away, a task that might prove too hard for him. In the sanctuary, the Omega Mutant has assembled a large crowd, complete with announcer, as well as 7 other combatants, as he prepares for a tournament made up of some of the world's most powerful beings: Gentle, She-Hulk, Juggernaut, Big Bertha, Strong Guy, Armor, Abomination, and the blue-skinned Zulu Titan of Destruction himself, Maggot. Is this Maggot's peculiar way of passing time, or is he beefing himself up for the coming battle? Either way, Eden still has a job to do. As Maggot wrestles with restraint, Storm struggles in her own way in Washington, D.C. She sits in an impossibly large room. One might think at a glance that this room was chosen to suit Storm's benefit. Her documented history of claustrophobia is well known. Perhaps the room would even serve to soothe Storm's nerves. As the host of Eternity, her need for open space has never been more pronounced in her life. It's giving Storm all the space that she could ever ask for, but not to comfort her. It's intended to make Aurora feel small, minuscule, inconsequential. So too does Special Agent Fabii, who walks in towering over Storm. The alien agent takes a seat and reminds Storm of her Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent, and she would be wise to choose her words. Saying the wrong thing could land her in a supervillain correctional facility for 5 years. Before the interrogation begins, Fabii takes out an inhalation device, not unlike that of a hookah, attached to a nitrogen canister. He's from a planet that has a more nitrogen-rich atmosphere than Earth's. These aren't tokes of pleasure, they're his breath of life. Storm silently acknowledges this fact, and with that, the interrogation begins. Agent Fabii starts by asking Storm about the emission policies of her sanctuary. She assures the agent that her floating Atlanta home poses no threat to the environment nor the inhabitants of the city. The minds of Tony Stark, Lunella Lafayette, and Shuri have seen to that. The sanctuary emits no greenhouse gases, and its thrusters emit a light identical to the solar rays that rain down onto people, plants, and animals in the form of sunlight. But Fabii is not interested in Storm's environmentalism. He wants to talk about her status as a fugitive. Storm sits silently, staring daggers into Fabii as he needlessly brings up her past as a thief on the streets of Cairo, events that happened well over 20 years ago. True, she does wear it as a badge of honor. She's not ashamed by her past, but she is also no stranger to having people try to weaponize her past against her. Fabii asked if she's ever faced punishment for these crimes, if she feels the need to submit herself to a working legal system. He sees the hand that Storm's playing and is ready to raise. He asks for a report of her activities over the past 6 weeks. Her Avengers-related missions are filed and reported by the Impossible City, but she has also brought with her a full report of her solo undertakings. He doesn't want to talk about Storm's position as a hero. He's more interested in her status as a victim. He asks if she's been kidnapped over the past 6 weeks. She says she hasn't been. He believes that she may have recently been under the psychic influence of another, and that her memories may have been telepathically altered. Storm tells the agent that she's immune to telepathy, like her friends Gambit and Jubilee, all of whom have latent energy surging through their bodies and brains, making forceful entry into their minds nigh impossible. Fabii wants to test this hypothesis of hers. She gives the towering FBI agent her hand in consent. Fabii directs Aurora to the telepathy simulation machine next door, but Storm has no intentions of leaving this room. She knows this isn't real. Everything that's transpired after he let go of her hand is not reality. Storm stands abruptly, lightning cascading from her eyes and surging around the room. Greater beings than he have tried to force their ways into Storm's mind, and they have failed. But telepathic trickery aren't his only powers. With a fling of his arm, Storm is slammed into the wall, leaving a crater. The alien agent cackles into the nitrogen-filled darkness. Storm has walked right into his trap and admitted that she harbored the fugitive Charles Xavier and assisted his off-world escape of her own free will. In America, his America, there are rules and regulations that one must follow, and those who don't will swiftly be placed under arrest, just like Aurora herself. She stands ready for battle with lightning-clad fists as Fabi draws his service pistol. At her back, 3 equally odd agents stand ready to assist. Storm will answer for her obstruction of justice, but for now, she has the right to remain silent. Anything she says can and will be used against her in a court of law. In a cold, uncaring cell, Aurora Monroe sits patiently, awaiting the opportunity to enact her right to make a phone call. But there's only one person she wants to call, and she's not available. Jennifer Walters, aka Sensational She-Hulk, Storm's longtime friend, occasional teammate, and lawyer. She knows that Jen Walters is dedicated to upholding the sanctity of the law. If she's unreachable, it's for a good reason. Maggot's Tournament of Power is underway. Adam Brashear, Blue Marvel, begins the 10 count. Strong Guy flexes, assured of his victory. But Jen Walters is a power shifter. At her command, colossal energy surges through her body, causing her bone and muscle to exponentially skyrocket and granting her unimaginable physical capabilities. The tournament rages on, and match by match, winners are declared. But this tournament isn't what it seems. It's far more than a simple test of might amongst the world's strongest. They are preparing for something greater. But we'll touch back in with them later, because at that same moment, Aurora Monroe was about to subject herself to a lie detector test unlike any she had ever experienced before. Storm's face contorts with disgust as the slimy creatures attach themselves to her fingertips. But Fabi is determined to get to the bottom of this. The remains of this ancient being can still detect all of Storm's vital functions, her heart rate, blood pressure, and all other physiological signals that would reveal the truth or a lie. Storm momentarily empathizes with the dead shell of a being, but Fabi reminds her that it can't feel anything. Neither can the parasites that ended its life so long ago. With a parasite left unchecked, the host always dies. Storm's steely blue eyes gaze ahead. Her ears fixate on his words. Though she doesn't know why yet, his words will prove to be prophetic. And with one more hit of nitrogen, Fabi begins the interrogation. Storm answers each question truthfully. But behind the two-way glass, Agent Lundquist and the other FBI agents are beginning the next phase of their plan. As Fabi continues his questions, he makes his way to the Oklahoma incident. But Storm is aware of the deaths and the millions of dollars that the mutant child caused when his powers began to erupt. This too, she admits to truthfully. Storm also admits that if she were to mouth his location, no one would hear those words. And yet, the alien agent presses on. Finally, he gets to what he really cares about, the immense cosmic power coming from Storm's sanctuary that has yet to be reported to any government agencies. She doesn't report large energy sources that she houses in her sanctuary, nor does she reveal the location of dangerous mutant fugitives. In fact, she helps some of them escape. Perhaps Storm really is a danger to the United States. Storm says she isn't, but the lie detector test determines that that is a lie. Finally, he's got her right where he wants her. Meanwhile, in Limbo, the other FBI agents, led by Agent Etienne, prepare to make a deal with the devil. She comes to this great demon, offering it greatness, the same greatness that these demons' grandfathers had in days of old, battling against Asgardian rock trolls, causing Sidorak to shudder. Greatness that seems to be lost on this current generation of demons. But this great demon is not so easily tempted. He led the assault on the trolls. He made Sidorak bleed for killing his wife. He conjures up hellish tendrils that reach out and ensnare the agents, trapping them and surging pain through their nervous system. But through tears of pain and fear, Etienne makes another offer. Ilyana Rasputin, Magic lays claim over Limbo because of her soul sword. Madeline Pryor does the same through her Scythe of Sorrows. And according to her, there are ways to create these essence blades, a skill that can be taught to all the rebel factions in Limbo, creating chaos and ruin that will allow the old guard to seize power. If greatness won't do, perhaps power will. She returns to Earth victorious, broken and bandaged, but victorious nonetheless. In exchange for this power, the demons of Limbo are to wreak havoc on the Storm Sanctuary, meaning the Sanctuary's power source, which radiates energy comparable to Galactus, is unguarded and ripe for the taking. However, Agent Etienne is mistaken, and by the time the agents reach the Sanctuary, Maggot and his compatriots have already made short work of these demonic intruders, joined by Storm's friends and rivals from previous ages, Callisto, Iska, and John Ironfire, just to name a few. And they're just getting started. She-Hulk has Manifold teleport her up to the agents, where she gives them a She-Hulk style salutation. Back at FBI HQ, Storm has grown tired of these games, these tricks. Her good friend Gambit is a master at cards, so she knows all about bluffs and tells. For BE has paraded around stacks of warrants, making it appear as though everything he does is by the book, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. He betrays the trust that his position has earned him, all his theatrics, just to hide his true intentions, an illegal raid on Storm's home. He is an absolute disgrace, as are all of his fellow agents. And now that Storm's lawyer isn't busy anymore, she lets them know just how mean she can be when she's in front of a jury. She-Hulk and her client depart, and if the FBI has any problems with that, they'll have to bring it up in court. Storm is home again, but the threat is far from over. Eden incorrectly assumes that the agents were after the Sanctuary's engine. In truth, they were after something much more dangerous, much more explosive. In the modern day, humans fight wars with bombs, and it just so happens that Eternity does the same. With this weapon, Eternity intends to end his battle with Oblivion before it even begins, and so he has taken full use of his new host, and used her home as a storage facility for his greatest weapon. But Storm is wisening up to Eternity's plans. She knows that something has taken possession of her body. It makes her watch through her own eyes as it commits atrocities with her hands. Any attempts to resist it results in burning flesh and bones stabbed with needles. Hours, sometimes days, go unaccounted for. As she informs Eden of her perilous position, she's reminded of something. Storm has felt like this before, years ago, when she was but a child, journeying across the Sahara. Even after spending years as a street thief, she still had trust in her heart for others. Trust that monsters would take advantage of, as they tried to do with her own body. She defended herself as best she could, and it was the last mistake that monster ever made. It was Storm's first time taking life, and to this day, it is one of her most painful memories. Storm's tears from days ago, after her first time serving as the host of Eternity, now drop all the more loudly. Her autonomy as a human has always been something to conquer, food for monsters, whether they be man or spirit. Each time, the attacker learned a hard lesson, and now, at age 30, Storm stands at the precipice of ultimate power, overlooking ruin, and she is ready to teach that lesson to Eternity. But first she must figure out what to do with this creature that Eternity has stashed away in her home. This is Abraxas, the physical embodiment of destruction, the bomb entity. Time advances like the flash that it is, and in the near future, Eternal Storm readies herself. The dreadful bomb entity is being used as a cosmic battery. Eternity first learned this trick from watching Earth's power shifters through Storm's eyes, but it also harkens back to Storm's own abilities to draw upon greater spiritual powers. be it the faith of others who believe and trust in her, or the great ancestors of her family's past. In this moment, it matters not, for Abraxas surrenders to the Eternal One, a fact that it speaks freely from its own mouth, as the Swahili words echo throughout the cosmos. Above the eternal storm hovers the Black Winter, who's waited for eons for eternity to finally grow a warrior's spirit. Eternal Storm manifests a blade and proclaims doom and destruction to Black Winter. It's mistaken restraint for weakness, but in the body of Aurora Monroe, eternity is unbound, unchained, limitless. A maelstrom of pure cosmic energy shreds through the black blizzard, tearing it asunder and leaving nothing behind, like a comet streaking through the heavens and coming to rest therein. Eternal Storm prepares now to finish off Oblivion and teach him fear, to teach Hadad fear and defeat. But Eternity doesn't know that he's too late. Oblivion will not know defeat by his hands. For Hadad, the First and the Terrible, has already personally delivered defeat to Oblivion, made into a throne for the first Storm God. Oblivion is his. Eternity will be next. In the Principality of Madripoor, 4 days from today, a familiar, friendly face runs through the forest, clutching his chest. Lucas Bishop, the master of energy absorption, is about to burst. Crimson energy spews forth from his chest and rockets into the air, piercing the black clouds above and serving as a homing beacon. The reason why will become known soon, but first we must retreat back to the present, where Storm is accompanied by Maggot and Manifold, conducting a recovery and cleanup mission in space. The Avengers have discovered a new planet, but NASA's view of this new planet is being obstructed by this thing that floats in the middle of space. Their job is simple: to get rid of it. The perfect job for the Omega Maggot and his endlessly hungry slugs. Manifold wonders how Maggot will be able to eat something as large as a tri-state area. But this conversation was between Maggot and Storm, two Omegas. And while Eden's vast teleportation powers allow him to fold the universe to his will, he's still no Omega. And so he leaves the devouring of rotten kaiju space flesh to his broad-shouldered comrade. Even as Storm proclaims her title, Mistress of the Cosmic Elements, breaking down any bacterial bodies that may be found in this kaiju's remains, she can't help but join in. She too reminds Eden of his place in the pecking order of mutants. It's an Omega thing, he wouldn't get it. And as Maggot slugs begin their 3-day smorgasbord, Eden challenges Storm to a little game of truth or dare. He asks if she and Emperor T'Challa have secretly begun dating again. They have recently been seen reconnecting among their fellow Avengers, but this isn't a question Storm cares to answer. By day 3, the trio sit in silence, as Storm continues to plead the fifth. Elsewhere in Orun, the realm of the Orishas, Shango sits and contemplates. His mighty crystal tower overlooks majestic long-necked birds, ritualistic statues, and white clouds as far as the eye can see. But despite all of this splendor, Shango is not content. He knows who lurks in the shadows, whose eyes illuminate said shadows as lightning erupts from them, igniting her ritual war paint as she makes herself known. Maybe if he had slept with his eyes open like Storm had warned him to, he wouldn't wake up feeling so uneasy. But Shango is not one to give in to fear. He looks to the Earth Storm Goddess, assuring her that her confidence is the folly of youth. Thin trails of lightning stretch out from his palm and bring his war axe to him. With a butterfly twist, he leaps through the air, body unbound and unclothed, as if to further taunt and humiliate Storm, who is adorned in her vibranium war armor. Shango is prepared to re-educate Storm in the nude. He opens the fight with a hurl of lightning, which Storm easily blocks. The lightning simply travels around her, refusing to do her harm. She stands her ground and makes her position clear. Shango came to her homeworld, conjured an anomaly that claimed innocent life, initiated an ambush on her and her teammate unprovoked, and in order to survive, she had to cut her hair. Storm slams her trident down into Shango's sanctified palace floor, calling forth solar radiated lightning, forming a cage around the two storm gods, and ensuring that there can be no escape. But Shango is not one known to retreat, which is something that Storm planned on. Despite the immeasurable power that she wields today, Storm has lived a life of hardship, going all the way back to her youth on the mean streets of Cairo, as she broke into fortresses, enchanted caves, and so much more. Before she could topple titans with hurls of wind, she had trained her body and mind until every fiber of her being spasmed with pain. Now she stands tall, an omega of omegas, staring down gods who have shaped and shaken entire nations, who are not keen on sharing their titles or spaces with mortals like herself. Shango grits his teeth in an all too familiar way, as raw godly energy seeps through the gaps in his mouth. Another electrified fire blast looms, as he prepares to teach Storm that she can't beat him alone. But Storm responds with a gentle parting of the lips, a subtle smile, and breathing of cool, icy air, for she knows just how wrong the Orisha is. A mighty titanic fist bursts through the wall. The fist of the Omega Maggot pummels Shango with immeasurable force. Once again, the Zulu brawler has proven that he's a master at killing two birds with one stone. That kaiju buffet was more than just a mission from NASA. It was a preparation for this very mission. Shango flies helplessly through the sky, getting one last dig in at Maggot before he flies over the horizon. Storm has indeed found use for the troll, as well as two mutant teleporters who can reach locations outside of our universe. For both Manifold and Gateway have made the Storm Sanctuary their new home. Their first job helped Storm reach a pocket dimension that would become the perfect prison cell for unruly and unwanted entities. And as he plummets into the depths of blackness, a void which stretches out beyond reason, even he can't help but admit that Storm played this very well. He comes to rest in a still silent realm which even he cannot escape from without help. But he won't be alone. Chak, the Mayan god of thunder and war, is already here. The trio return victorious to the Storm Sanctuary, just in time to see Bishop's beacon, and the tidings it brings make Storm stop in her tracks. Nearly 10,000 miles away, back in Madripoor, Bishop now sits, clothed in his X-Men attire, overlooking a familiar child, Jaden, the same mutant child who exploded in Oklahoma City with violent nuclear reactions at the onset of her powers. Bishop, the Master Absorber, has been tasked with overseeing her, for who else could take all that pent-up energy in this young child's body, absorb it within themselves, and then release it, all without harming himself or anyone else. This is not a cause for alarm, but celebration. Storm embraced this child with love before she even knew her name. As Jaden tries to explain and apologize, Storm stops her and tells her to simply breathe. As she adorns Jaden's hair in a bun, she reassures her that they'll be able to relocate her without problem. But at that moment, this loving reunion is cut short by violence. Maggot and Manifold are swiftly cut down by an unseen force. Blood splatters the room and all within it as their bodies are ripped to pieces. Far away, our resident FBI ne'er-do-wells reveal themselves to be the masters behind this plot. Agent Etienne is using her voodoo with lethal efficiency. But Fabii isn't satisfied with simply their deaths. He wants to take Storm as well. He knows this is the only chance he'll get to kill a god. The dark magic that Etienne wields is but one of many things that are worse than a god. Norin Rad, the Silver Surfer Soot, is another example. He is a herald, and when you see him, there is a world-ending behemoth not too far behind. Galactus' fall levels the forest and puts a swift end to the FBI agents' machinations. But Storm, Bishop, and Jaden have much, much bigger problems. As the sky parts in the most unnatural of ways, forming a diamond-shaped door for none other than infinity to walk through. The unknowable expansion of all reality has come, and she is looking for her brother, Eternity. In a future time, Galactus and the Silver Surfer were saved by Infinity as a black winter sought to devour them. In exchange, she demanded answers. When they had no satisfying answer to give, she pummeled them within an inch of their lives. Still no answer. This leaves only one person in all of existence who would know. Aurora Monroe, the host of Eternity. The soil of Madripoor is drenched in blood. Friends and foes of Storm, Bishop, and Jaden lie strewn about the battlefield. On one side, the remains of Maggot and Manifold. On the other, the unconscious FBI agents Fabii and Etienne. The World Eater Galactus lies wounded on the ground. Normally, he carries the power to end entire planets, but in such a weakened state, he is little more than a source of energy for the FBI. The mutant child Jaden cowers in the corner, as Bishop tends to the agents. With boot and with bullet, he lays them to waste, parkouring across Galactus' limbs and taking an agent out with every move. But this fight, while impressive, is only an undercard for a main event of universal proportions. Under normal circumstances, Storm would be more diplomatic, using her words to calm Infinity down, maybe even persuading the abstract entity to work with her. But on this day, neither Storm nor Infinity had time to talk, for Infinity was growing weaker and more distraught by the minute. Her separation from her twin brother Eternity was weighing down on her, but this weight was minuscule compared to the weight on Storm's heart. Two friends were taken from her right in front of her eyes, and she knows that it's all her fault. As the fight drags on and Infinity grows weaker with each blow, Storm only grows stronger. The careful identity of restraint that she has built up for all 30 years of her life is crumbling beneath her feet. And as stoicism gives way to fury, Storm's more terrifying powers begin to surface. Powers which have been passed down through the generations of her maternal line, blessed by the elder goddess Oster, the same powers that her ancestors Ashake and Aisha wielded in their times of need. But this is not a mere time for need for Storm. This is a time of mourning, not just for her fallen friends, but her own sense of self. Eternity has made her his plaything, and on the rare occasion where she would need him, he has abandoned her. She's a pawn in a game that she never asked to play. But in this moment, when her emotions take over, the pawn becomes a queen. This side of her was shown to Dr. Doom when he thought to make her his plaything, and it was revealed to Storm herself by way of the Black Vortex, tempting her to taste of this ultimate power. Back then, she turned it down, knowing just what dangers it could bring, but she won't turn away this time. This time, she takes the goblet of power in both hands and drinks from it in full. Gateway appears and portals away with the remains of his fallen friends. The tectonic plates shift and grind, and the entire earth shakes. Endless waves of blue fire spew from Storm's mouth as lightning bolts trace her form, enveloping her and signaling a transformation. Gone are the days when her own powers will be used against the ones she loves. Gone are the days when people will make her remember the worst parts of her life by stripping her of her autonomy. Her will, her mind, her body, and her destiny are hers and hers alone to command. She is taken by no one, she bows to no one. And this is what makes Ororo Monroe a goddess. The sky dims in an unnatural color, as if the world itself were about to end. The one signaling its Armageddon hovers hundreds of feet in the air. In her upstretched palm forms a spark, which then expands to gargantuan proportions. A bomb, formed by this spirit of fury, now illuminates the sky. Surges of divine lightning race down to the ground, lashing infinity in the back and piercing through her chest. As if the preceding battle wasn't hard enough, Storm's not done teaching a lesson to this entity yet. For one rare moment in her lifetime, her emotions are in control, and they're telling her to do one thing. And Infinity is suffering so much from the absence of her brother that she would welcome it. The sky and the ground have disappeared, all enveloped in Storm's godly energy. Nothing controls her now, nothing but her emotions. They have made her, the one who craves freedom the most, a slave. And now they're about to do much more than that. Storm looks down as the Silver Surfer races toward her. Galactus and Bishop look on as well, alerting her of what she's about to do. But out of all of them, it's Jaden's voice that reaches her the deepest. Galactus holds up his hand, letting the girl walk forward, speaking words that only she can speak, for they're the same words that Storm spoke to her when she was losing herself. Just as Storm is losing herself now, enough lives have been lost today. The child's words ring true in Storm's ears. Tears fall freely from her illuminated eyes, and just like that, Armageddon is evaded. As Storm wrestles with the darkest part of her soul, a council meeting is being held in the neutral realm for all pantheons. Every storm god in existence is in attendance, including Susanoo and Mama Ragan, two of the 4 storm gods who ambushed Ororo Monroe. The reason behind their random act of violence is finally revealed. This wasn't simply a power move, but one of pettiness. In classic godly fashion, these ancient beings were jealous, all because Ororo Monroe, the mutant, was chosen by eternity to be his champion, his vessel, his host. Hadad approaches ever closer, and these gods must all choose a side. Will they stand with the universe or against it, as Hadad seeks to destroy it and start it anew? Zeus leads the proceedings, commanding those who are in favor of joining forces with Storm to raise their hand. Only one brave voice speaks up on behalf of Ororo, none other than Beta Ray Bill himself. He stands tall, lightning surging from his eyes, speaking plainly about the madness happening before him. Perhaps the centuries of excess mead and wine have finally taken their toll. These are the same storm gods who have all slain their own leviathans, as if the universe itself is simply playing a familiar tune over and over again. What is this but another dragon to slay? But Beta Ray Bill's impassioned speech falls on deaf ears. These gods are far too petty to listen to reason, and far too vain to ally themselves with the likes of Ororo. So Beta Ray Bill calls his hammer to him, just as his friend and brother Thor has done with Mjolnir. If they won't listen to reason, then maybe Asgardian steel and Uru metal will do the trick. And just as Storm has done, Beta Ray Bill prepares to make his stand against his divine brethren. But this fight will not take place, for the Black Winters have arrived.
You think this is over? I'm just getting warmed up! I can't die yet! There are still more to kill!
Beta Ray Bill twirls his hammer and prepares to duel with the Black Winter. even if he is the only storm god left standing. But these black winters are the tools of Hadad, who is no widowmaker, no orphan maker. When Hadad steps into our universe, everyone dies. Back on Earth, Storm is forced to deal with death in her own way. Japheth is no more, and Eden clings to life against all odds, as doctors race around the clock to stitch him back together. Storm is back to her normal self, her flowing locks fully restored by her transformation. But her hair is the last thing on her mind right now. All she can think of is how she failed those who she loves by being too stubborn to receive help when offered. She should have studied with Dr. Voodoo. She should have took Thor up on his offer. Perhaps Storm has more in common with her fellow Thunder Gods than they or she can realize right now. But Storm is learning from her lessons, as she also learns just how cruel this universe can be. To help his mournful friend, Gateway places his fingers upon Storm's face and illuminates her regarding the situation at hand. Eternity stands at the feet of his father, the one above all. He has come to bargain for all of our fates. Oblivion has already paid the ultimate price, and his sister Death's ways are unknown. Their powerful friends and allies are already scattered to the wind, fighting their own fronts in this thunder war. Jean Grey, the Phoenix, has come home to defend the Forge of Creation and the mutant civilization she houses within it. Scarlet Witch and the Never Queen defend the land of possibilities to keep magic and creativity alive. Infinity and her avatar, Quasar, stand at the ready to repel Black Winters, as do Galactus and his herald the Silver Surfer. All the players are in place, leaving Aurora Monroe, the last and youngest storm god on Earth, to face Hadad, the first and oldest, all by herself. At the uppermost stratosphere of the planet, a meeting between the Alpha Storm God, Hadad, and the Omega Storm Goddess, Aurora Monroe, has begun. They have yet to exchange blades, fists, or feats of elemental power, and yet our atmosphere has already been set ablaze. Citizens and superheroes alike can only gaze up in amazement and fear as lightning bolts cascade across the horizon, and only those lucky enough to call Storm a friend are comforted. They know that in the end she will prevail, but that doesn't mean her victory will be easily brought about. In fact, one such person, Dr. Voodoo, the Hongan Supreme himself, has come to give aid to his new friend and would-be student, but his advance is stopped by three impossibly powerful beings, representing Death herself. Storm finally speaks, uttering the name of the one who seeks to end her existence. He acknowledges her as well as the host of eternity. But he doesn't want Storm to die without knowing why this day had to come, why the abstracts and cosmic entities had to fall, along with their universe. In all of their pronouncements, they've neglected to explain why he has come. As Storm readies her trident, clad in her vibranium war armor, she knows that Hadad's words have truth laced within them, because in all the time that she has been acquainted with eternity, he has never once uttered a word about the importance of their partnership. But what more can she expect from an entity who does not ask for permission when taking control of her body? Her acts of restraint and mercy are seen by eternity as weakness. He sees Storm as nothing more than a tool that must be broken in, or rather, broken down. She understands the desire to give in to vengeance, as well as the heavy crown of duty, and yet she refuses to back down. She will not accept death on this day, not for herself, not for her universe. She promises to give this immortal a swift end if he should move against her planet. Hadad's unstoppable mission now stands toe-to-toe with Aurora's immovable will, and so the final fight of the Thunder War begins. Hadad opens the battle with relentless blows, each one laced with divine lightning. Storm's mortal body crumbles beneath them, but not without taking her own pound of flesh from Hadad. In all of her days, Storm has not been physically tested to this extent, and in a matter of minutes, Storm's vibranium armor is smashed to pieces, its remaining fragments barely holding on to Storm's flesh as she vomits up blood and tries to catch her breath. But Hadad's fighting is as ferocious as the elements that he controls. Hadad launches his spear through the air. Storm tries to block it with a wall of ice, but both it and her shoulder are shattered. And for humiliation's sake, the ancient Devastator raises his thunder spear without lifting a finger, forcing Storm along for the ride as she cries out in pain. And with a crack of his neck, he prepares to finish this fight. Before doing so, he intends to teach Storm a lesson in godhood. Storm's crystal blue eyes, though sparkling and older than time, have not yet learned how to look with boundless sight, so she knows nothing of the hosts of eternity who came before her. He once played host to eternity under the title of Hadad the Devastator, and before him, Eternal Madness the Insane. Storm now stands as Eternal Storm the Turbulent, and yet she hasn't even begun to truly walk in her purpose. Hadad once dominated the primordial abstract entities and drained the living tribunal. Only the one above all was strong enough to stand against his onslaught, and yet here Storm lies, defeated. And so, Hadad summons a Black Winter and prepares to end the story of Aurora Monroe. In previous fights, Storm would have been embodied by eternity by now, forcing her hand to commit atrocities against her own loved ones and age-old rivals who she views with respect. But now, in her time of absolute need, he is absent, communing with his father, the one above all, in the House of Ideas. Just as Hadad seeks to teach Storm something before she dies, the one above all sees an opportunity to teach a lesson to his son. All loving parents seek to see their offspring surpass them. So too does the one above all, as he titles eternity a supreme creator, superior even to himself. But eternity can't accept this praise, not while he cowers in fear from his own creation and abandons another. Eternity kneels in submission and shame before his father. Why should he help Eternity? He didn't even bring anything to bargain with. All Eternity does is take and seek to take more. He took from Oblivion, the first son, until he grew impossibly weak. Eternity took Death, Oblivion's twin, and housed her within himself. And when Hadad came for him, he fell. What makes Eternity worthy of the one above all's compassion? Why should he give when Eternity only takes? Perhaps he should give, but from his wrath. Eternity begins to sink fast as the sins of his past weigh him down. But the one above all continues his lesson. For in the Oblivion void, only days ago, Eternity took and took again, unleashing his son, Abraxas, the bomb entity, to end Oblivion before their next trial by combat would even begin. The living tribunal was clear when he passed down the edict of the one above all, but Eternity sought selfishly to move around the rules that his father had placed before him, like a disobedient child. In another childish attempt to circumnavigate responsibility, Eternity places the blame on Oblivion once again for releasing Hadad in the first place. But the one above all is not moved. He is the uncreated creator, Lord of the multiverse. Order and chaos understand each other. Life and death reached a compromise. The only ones who can't get along, the ones who want each other dead, are Eternity and Oblivion, and Hadad stands ready to grant both of their wishes. But before final judgment can be passed, lightning erupts from the sky as the Asgardian god of thunder, Beta Ray Bill, arrives to aid Aurora, atop the head of the serpent storm god, Sugar, who blitzes Hadad with divine flames. But all they manage to destroy is his thunder spear, and as he's already demonstrated, Hadad is never without a weapon. Now the Asgardian is on the receiving end of Hadad's fury, as his blows send him flying through the air with meteoric fury. Before he or Sugar can act, Hadad unleashes an explosion of subarctic cold, freezing the two gods in place. This is not merely another storm god, another child of Gaia, for the Elder Gods are not Eternity's masterpiece. That title belongs to Hadad the First. And yet, there is another. One born not of the elder goddess Gaia, but of her sister, Oster. She hurls herself through the air, body healed and spirits renewed, as she claims the form prophesied by the Black Vortex. Only this time, she's in full control. Hadad stops her in the air, wrapping his hand around her throat, but she responds by locking her legs around his arm. The divine combatants stare at each other, as lightning races from their eye sockets, clashing in the middle. Storm's white lightning of life and Hadad's black lightning of death. The second round of their fight has begun. Elsewhere, the One Above All continues his lesson with Eternity. While these two creators have vastly different creations, their experiences as creators are all too familiar. They're both artists, and every artist knows what it's like to hate their work, to hate what their work says about themselves. When Eternity sees Hadad, he is so blinded by hate and fear that he can't see the beauty in his other creations, one of whom fights for her universe now. She too represents Eternity, and shows just how good he can be. And if Eternity could offer just a modicum of compassion to his creation, then perhaps he would know love, just as the One Above All loves his son. Eternity looks into the vast, outstretched existence, humbled and ready to make amends. And in this instant, a true shifting of the tide occurs. Eternal Storm awakens once again, using her patented immortal head smash to strike Hadad down. And she's not the only one turning the tide. Galactus and his Surfer prepare to free the storm gods trapped within the Black Winter, who have not yet been fully consumed. Infinity and Quasar find their second wind as power surges over them. Her heart warms with joy as she is reunited with her brother. And Eternity starts down the long road of contrition, for he has much to apologize for. He broke his father's heart, for he has no honor, and there is no greater example of this than his treatment of his own creation. He pleads for her forgiveness. Storm has many words to share with her creator, but for now she's willing to put that aside and work together with him, provided that he gives his word to never betray her will again. Eternity agrees, and for the first time in their sordid history, Eternity and Storm are on one accord. The white in Eternal Storm's garb turns to solid black, mirroring the color scheme that Storm often takes in her earthly clothes. Though our universe has often given Aurora Monroe its worst, she chooses to give it her best. This all-too-common refrain in Storm's life would normally cause her to weep, but now all it conjures up is a single tear to trace her cheek. She calls forth the abstract entity of destruction, calmly asking him to loan her his strength. As Eternal Storm's power amplifies, Eternity posits a strategy. He suggests combining their strength with Infinity, the Never Queen, and the Phoenix Force. But Storm doesn't see the need to bring their sisters into this. She's ready to end this battle now, her own way. Her assault is legendary. Each blow etches Hadad's imminent defeat into the annals of history. And as her fists rip Hadad's face open, the elements gleefully aid their mistress in her assault. Electricity supercharges her body to move at blinding speed. The atmosphere pushes down on her fists with pressure akin to the sun's plasma core. while gravity locks Hadad onto the ground with the force of a black hole. Just as she was jumped by 4 storm gods not too long ago, Storm and her elements have now ganged up on the lone Alpha Thunder deity. Finally, Eternal Storm relents. She is now the one who towers over a beaten opponent. There's no need for death at all. Execution is not a necessary sentence when imprisonment will do. Hadad will share a cell with Chak and Shango in Storm's pocket dimension. But with his face grotesquely mangled and his body utterly broken, he makes an appeal to Storm against the creators of all that is. What is an Omega mutant? What is a god to such beings? Nothing but instruments of amusement. And deep within Storm, Eternity grows increasingly afraid. Storm has not only sought to spare Hadad, but has lent him an ear as well. Humility and compassion have led to Eternity and Storm finally becoming true partners, but now he fears that they will bring about his eventual undoing. So in an act of selfish preservation, Eternity's deep-seated nature forces itself to the surface once again as he forces Storm's hand. Her will has been usurped by Eternity for the last time. With every fiber of her being, she rejects and ejects Eternity. Her mind can conjure but one single thought: never again. The battle has ended, the war is over, but there is no victor. This darkness is not confined to Storm alone, for in the realm of death, Oblivion's sister conspires. Lady Death has captured Jericho Drum. She will make this necromancer her executioner's blade, as she and her forces wage war on those responsible for slaying her brother. As one war ends, another begins. The war above all.